I've read on the history of Black contributions to social welfare. In social work, I've not done any primary research. I'll just be sharing how I've made social work history a priority in my research and how I've incorporated Black social work history into my anti-racism work. In the summaries, I'll be using a critical historical view of social work to correct what I believe are admissions and the dominant view of social work history. And I want to underscore that historically, many white social workers advocated for the welfare and needs of Black people. Some statements that I make are focused towards the profession in general, and I should make clear that the authors in these texts had differing interpretations of Black social work history. So what I'm sharing with you isn't representative of everything that I've read. It's just the things that stuck out to me. So I'm going to start this talk by discussing the history of racism in our profession. I'll then be going into Black traditions that have been incorporated into our profession, and some of them in response to addressing the effects of racism. And then I'll discuss how ideas in Black social work movements have shaped Black social work. I'll finish by briefly highlighting key Black social worker leaders and discussing how we can change the future of social work history in an effort towards anti-racism. All right, so just as an overview, I became interested in Black social work history in my doctoral social work history course with Dr. Mark Harty. When I first learned in his class that the Hull House didn't serve Black people. I went to the Jane Addams College of Social Work, and I just always assumed that they had. Ever since then, I've just really wanted to know more about the experience of Black people in their interactions with social work. And I've done this by looking into Black historical research. I've been able to, in the guide that I came out with, I was able to obtain nearly all the resources for free in there. I had to buy a few older books that were not available in libraries or online. So after teaching a course where a student had asked me if there were any big or historical Black social workers, after that question, I decided to make the guide publicly available to them and to people on my Prof to Prof page and Twitter page. And I just want to underscore the fact that, I've been told that there wasn't a lot of research on Black social workers. However, there's a lot, and it was very easy to find. And so I really think this begs the question of why we haven't been learning about or teaching about Black history more, Black social work history. So to get into Black social work history, I want to talk about how in much of that history, the Black social work contributions have been largely devalued in our profession. We learn about social work history, and when we do, we often start, excuse me, when we do learn about it, we often start with the English Poor Laws and entirely skip over key contributions in the Black helping tradition during slavery and with our struggles for freedom. An important contribution of Black social work has been by Black scholars determined to document our history in an effort to correct omissions and inaccuracies in social work history. Social work is understood as a caring profession focused on addressing the welfare needs of its clients. However, historical research demonstrate that this hasn't been the case for Black people. A number of authors point out ways in which racism in our profession has legitimated and prejudice and discrimination affecting how Black clients, workers, students, and scholars were treated in social work. Specifically, racism has affected our profession as it relates to practice, employment, education, and research. So in terms of racism in practice, authors found that racism in our profession has led to denying or restricting services for Black clients and forcing them to address their needs on their own. Historically, the services that were provided were low quality or too expensive for the Black communities to afford. And it has also led to this idea that services that were designed for whites or Europeans would automatically work for Blacks, and ignoring how racism affects interactions with Black clients. Racism in our profession, racism in our profession's employment practices has affected how Black social workers were recruited and trained. And due to racism in our profession, Black social workers were left unprotected from harsh work environments not connected to peer supports, and had their strengths devalued and underutilized. Racism in social work education made existing campus segregation a harsher experience. Social work content and curriculum didn't cover Black issues, and when it did, it was perceived as discriminatory against white students. Black social work students often face difficulty in obtaining scholarships or funding, and were left to pay for school on their own. Racism in teaching institutions impacted Black social work faculty and lecturers in teaching roles, particularly when they were trying to obtain academic positions or tenure. So racist ideas around the intellectual capacity of Blacks has historically led to beliefs that Blacks are non-rational and non-scientific. Blacks have been seen as not able to be detached and objective in research, and therefore unable to conduct research. Racism in research institutions have affected the ability of Black scholars to obtain funding and research opportunities, as well as leaving them with very few venues to publish their work. So, despite ongoing racism within our profession, authors highlight numerous attempts to address racism in social work, such as the 1968 National Association of Black Social Workers walkout at the National Conference on Social Welfare that ignited the Black social workers' challenge to the profession to address racism. Another example can be seen in the 1973 CSWE Black Task Force, who made recommendations for CSE to address pervasive and persistent racism in our profession. Right. Self-help for social protests and struggle for justice, for enhancement of educational economic status of Blacks, and for the establishment of Black institutions. All right, so now I'm going to move into the Black movements in social work. So in addition to the Black traditions, a number of Black social movements have infused Black thought into social work. In many ways, Black nationalist and integrationist thought has converged in various converged various Black ideologies into the profession of social work. And so in the texts that I read and that are included in my guide, these were the movements that a lot of the authors cited as being foundational in the minds of Black social workers. And they also kind of tracked the ways in which Black social workers really fought to bring these different types of ideologies into the profession. So the first one is around Black preservation, specifically the ways in which Black preservation has focused on preserving Black identity and culture, the Black family, the Black children, communities, human resources, and historical sites. And I think the most, perhaps the clearest way to understand this is in 1972, when the National Association of Black Social Workers issued their statement on opposing transracial adoption in an effort to preserve Black identity and Black culture by keeping Black children placed within Black families. Another dominant thought in this has been Black social workers challenging obstacles and barriers put up largely by racism in our profession that threaten their self-determination. For example, their conflicts with child welfare agencies, professional social work organizations, schools of social work's faculty and administrators, and particularly, and we'll get into this in a couple slides, the Eurocentric focus of the dominant social work. Black resistance in social work has been used by Black social workers to assert self-determination for social change, to rupture racist and oppressive thought that maintains conventional social work knowledge, also to oppose and overturn Eurocentric social work theories and models, frameworks that are hostile towards Blacks. And then also Black resistance has been leveraged to not passively accept social welfare policies that discriminate and marginalize and further socially isolate Blacks. All right, so in terms of Black liberation, Black social workers have advocated for the profession of social work to make liberation of Black people a key agenda item. And this made me see it in the quote by the National Association of Black Social Workers that says, if it's clear that the practice of social work by Blacks for Blacks must operate from a new theory, then this theory of liberation must be fully and unquestionably developed to its fullest by Blacks. Again, it would be chaotic for Blacks to begin to talk of a new set of values and then allow whites to define those values for us. So here you really see the theme of Black liberation coming through. There was also the Black thought around the abolition movement that's formed the foundation of Black social workers fighting to abolish slavery in all its forms, legal racism, oppression, and segregation. Afrocentricity was another key foundational Black thought that was infused into social work. And historical studies discuss the ways in which Afrocentric viewpoints have clashed with Eurocentric worldviews that dominate social work. And largely these Eurocentric viewpoints have driven our practice and teaching, our research on Black communities. They haven't been reflective of the realities of Black Americans. It ignores the cultural uniqueness of people with African ancestry. These Eurocentric models and theories have been adapted to address Black issues in Black neighborhoods, even though they weren't designed to be used with them. It often also fails to address the liberation needs of Black people, and in doing so, largely perpetuates racism in human services, and then forces this adoption of Eurocentric cultural values and practices. All right, so I want to finish by discussing some important Black leaders. So this is a small list of scholars researching Black social welfare and social work history. Again, this list is not exhaustive. These were the out of the articles and books that I got on Black social work history. These were some of the prominent authors in it. And again, not exhaustive. And then among those books, I just want to point out a few of the many Black social work and social welfare leaders that were discussed in those texts. And again, here's a list of them. And these were the Black social work leaders that were prominent in much of the work. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that there are a number of Black social work and social welfare leaders that were not researched, that were not documented in our history, that aren't on this list. And I also want to underscore the fact that there are many just on the ground Black social workers that were fighting for liberation, fighting for the rights of the Black community that also haven't been documented. So I want to briefly go into some ideas I have that I think will help us change our history, and I think share some ways in which I think we can make a more complete history of social work. I think we can work to incorporate Black social welfare and social work history into our curriculum and our doctoral comprehensive exams. I think that we should be interviewing and documenting the history of contemporary Black social work scholars, community members, and organizations, so they too are not also lost to history. I think we need to ensure that books on Black social work history are in our libraries, and that we're purchasing access to historical and contemporary journals targeting issues of Black people. I think we need to cultivate archives that are focused on Black social work contributions and history, and then reclaim and redefine Black history that I think is Black social work history, and understand that when the dominant group defines what is social work history, in doing so have left out a lot of things that we now attribute solely to Black history. But I think if we look at those efforts now, in that history now, I think we would very easily see that those were social work efforts. And then I think that we need to collaborate with Indigenous communities and communities of color to incorporate their social work history in this as well, and replicate the efforts that many of us are making towards Black social work history, making those also for Indigenous and communities of color's history. All right, so I want to share some ways that I plan to work towards a more complete history of Black social work. So I'm actively incorporating Black social work history into my curriculum. I'm leveraging this Black history to dismantle racism in our profession. I'm beginning to work with Dr. Jerome Shealy around researching contemporary Black social work scholars. I'm working with CSWE to produce an educator resource that will be basically a course on Black social work history, complete with syllabus, readings, slides, recorded guest lectures that will be shared on the CSWE website for anyone to download and use to form a course around it. And I'll be partnering with Dr. Jerome Shealy and also Dr. David Pate on that effort. And then also I'm a member of the Social Welfare History Group, and we'll be working on an expanded bibliography where we'll be leveraging more archival resources and also using other historical approaches to further look into and then share Black social work history. So I also want to highlight the ways that others are working right now to create a more accurate social work history. And so here are some amazing presentations that I think really get at the core and share in a lot more depth than what I'm able to, the contributions of Black social workers. So this first one is a talk that Dr. Iris Carlton-Lene just did. That's available on YouTube. And sorry, I should have said this in the beginning. I'll make sure that Greer gets these slides and send them out to you. Send them out to you all because all these talks are linked there. Also, Jerome Shealy and the crew working on the research around Black male social workers just had their talk at the White Supremacy Racial Justice Symposium that was put on at the University of Houston. That'll be available on YouTube, or that is already available on YouTube as well. There's a link to it. And then also the podcast, Doing the Work podcast with Dr. Denise McClain-Davidson and Mr. Garland Jagers on Black Power, Black Liberation, and social work. That is available on a bunch of different platforms for the podcast audio. All right, so I just want to conclude by saying some thanks to the following people that have been instrumental in helping me understand the importance of Black social work history. First, I want to thank two researchers that have really guided me in understanding and learning more about Black social work history. Dr. Jerome Shealy and Dr. Denise McClain-Davidson, both at Morgan State University. I've two advisors at SSA that have helped me have a more critical lens with the profession of social work, Dr. Mark Courtney and Dr. Waldo Johnson. My colleagues at the Social Welfare History Group that have also helped me understand and leverage social work history. Dr. Stephen Moa-Tomzak, Jessica Toft, Mimi, and Dr. Alice Gates. And just a shameless plug for the Social Welfare History Group. We're always looking for new members. So if you have an interest in any type of social work history, we're on Twitter. There's the URL to our webpage. You can email me, or through there you can sign up, and we love to have more folks on. And then, of course, CSWE MFP program, the entire MFP team, my fellows and alumni that have helped me understand the importance of leveraging peer supports among students of color. All right, so that's what I've got. Here's my contact information. I'll be sure to share these slides with Greer again, send out. I want to thank everyone for attending today. And then when you get the slides, I have a number of references in here that you can go to. Also, there are a whole bunch more in my guide.
Thank you so much, Justin. Don't leave just yet, because we're going to shift into reflections and Q&A. So I'm going to ask that you all keep your cameras and keep yourself muted for the moment. And I'll have our reflectors turn on their cameras as well. So that's Dr. Eshman, Alexis Monroe, and Aaron Camp. So what we're going to do now is have these members of our Boston University community offer a reflection of what they heard about Justin's talk, and also be able to pose a question. So I'm going to introduce our reflector team. And after this, we'll go into Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will be watching that for additional questions. So we'll begin with Dr. Eshman. Dr. Eshman has been a BUSSW faculty member since 2017. He's a scholar and teacher whose interests include educational inequality, community violence, racism, social media, and youth well-being. His research seeks to uncover individual, group, and institutional level barriers to racial and economic equity, and he pays special attention to the heroic efforts everyday people make to combat those barriers. We'll then have Alexis Monroe, who is a current MSW student. Alexis Monroe is passionate about understanding how history impacts expression, whether that history is personal, local, or societal. She's currently enrolled at Boston University as a Master's of Social Work and Master's of Theological Studies student. And finally, we'll have Aaron Camp. Aaron is a BUSW alumni and current PhD candidate at Brandeis University studying assets and inequalities, a recipient of the rigorous and renowned Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Health Policy Research Scholars Fellowship. Aaron's research interests include education inequality, social movements, community networks, syndemics, and HIV and AIDS among Black men who have sex with men. His current work includes a study aiming to understand the role of religious doctrine on congregational health programming efforts. So thank you, reflectors, for doing this, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Eshman.
Thank you very much, Greer. Thank you, Justin, too, for coming and doing this. This was incredible. Man, I could not take notes fast enough. So I'm glad that you're sharing the slides. And I'm also, glad I see lots of people in chat asking about how can they get access. Justin has made this stuff, freely available. You got people asking to pay you for this. And so thank you for making these resources available. I think this is something that, can benefit students, faculty, social workers. And so this is great work. So one of the things I want to reflect on is how some of what you're talking about connect to the current moment. So where, think about the social work field. Over the past decade, lots of schools of social work have seen students organize and demand attention to these types of things. Students are saying, we don't want, we're tired of seeing syllabi that have only white perspectives and that ignore some of these historical and contemporary issues. And I think that we've seen lots of changes from the curriculum to the things that are included and seen as canon at lots of different universities because of students organizing. And there were also, 2020, we saw sustained protests against anti-Black police violence. And now in 2021, we're starting to see a renewed commitment to issues of racial justice from schools of social work. And so again, it's kind of like there's this reckoning, and the social work is attempting to respond. And so what I'm really intrigued by in your presentation are the moments in history when social work attempted to have similar reckonings. I think you had a slide early on, right, where some of these things were coming out of mainstream social work, where they're having conferences or meetings to try and figure out how to deal with the race problem. And then you also have examples of Black actors, Black social workers who are trying to put pressure on the profession to include more attention to Black people, Black needs in the profession. And so I think one thing I'd like to hear is that of these types of historical moments in time when the social work profession decided we want to be better with the way that we think about race and racism, and the way that we include folks of color from being in the profession to the way that we provide services for communities of color. Where did we see, right? Are there examples of those things leading to positive changes, right? And where are those examples? And then if those types of moments in history did not have the type of effect and lasting impact that we would have like to see, why do you think that is? And if we can connect that to the current moment, how can social work avoid some of the pitfalls of the past that prevented us from being able to deal with these issues when social workers were already yelling and saying, hey, this is a problem? How can we avoid some of that and make sure that we really capture the power of the current moment, when we seem to have lots of people in and out of the profession who agree that racism needs to be at the forefront of the ways that we decide to do things, from educating folks in the classroom to the way that we do our work in the field.
Yeah, I think that I think back to sometimes I feel like I'm in that history. The National Association of Black Social Workers, that walkout, I think, was an absolutely defining moment. I think that I know that they were fed up with our profession's inability to address racism within the profession, and then also with the clients that we work with. And I think that at the time, it was surprising to dominant social work that it was such a contested issue. And I think that the National Association of Black Social Workers, I think that they're storming the stage, protesting, and then forming their own organization to continue to advocate for anti-racism in our profession was a defining moment. And I think that after that, you see CSWE's Black Task Force, who worked to come up with a number of policies around anti-racism. And I think I think we start to see a fundamental shift there in the profession. And I think that was, from what I've read and from what I can understand of it, or what I understand of that time period, was that social work, it seemed like they were willing, and at least they showed an effort to address it. You talked about some of the pitfalls on why some of those efforts haven't lasted through today. And I just want to say that I think social work as a profession overall has a very difficult time understanding our past. I'm part of the Social Welfare History Group, and we put together a bibliography on social work's response to pandemics, social work's responses to policing that we're just getting ready to release at the end of the month. And we're getting ready to work on ones around social work's response to racism. And I can take an article from the early 1900s, cover up that date and put 2021 in there, and you would think it was written today. And that's across all of those bibliographies. And so I just think that we need to do a better job of incorporating history into what we're doing, to understand that we didn't arrive here where we're at now by mistake. There are events that led up to it, and ways in which we haven't addressed issues that continue to exist and persist today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go over to Alexis. Yeah.
Thank you, Justin, so much. I think your comment at the beginning of how you weren't surprised that people were saying there wasn't this research out there, but there was a plethora of information, is a lot of the things we hear regarding anything in Black history, whether it's related to professions or media. There's this thinking that it's not out there because no one's researched it. Rather, it's out there, people are just marginalizing it. So my question is, how do you think we incorporate this into curriculums without it being something that is, okay, we're teaching this because it's Black? Yes, we have the knowledge and expertise of Black individuals, but that it's applicable to everyone doing work within social work, understanding that this is a large population that we serve. So what are some examples or like ideas that you've seen done well of how this is brought into the curriculum in a way that makes it accessible and accepted well by everyone in the profession?
Mm-hmm. I think that, I mean, there was a time where history was important to the profession of social work. There was a period of time where you can, in your PhD, you could do a historical dissertation. And I think that that time has passed, and it's unfortunate, because I think that, I don't think that we can have a complete understanding of the problems that we're trying to address if we just look at them through the context of contemporary events and circumstances. There's a series of historical events that have led us to where we're at. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And to that point, I think a way that we can better do that is to incorporate social work, more social work history into our curriculum outside of just classes on social work history. I think we need to do that first, but also working to include the histories of Black people, Indigenous people, and also other people of color, and understanding how that how the history is important to understanding the theories that we're developing, our interventions that we're developing, the models that we're using, and to pull away from these Eurocentric focused ideas and practices that clearly aren't having the intended effect. And I think that we need to start looking at individuals. You know, one note that I wrote when I wrote that, put that guide together was, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something like this. It was something along the lines of, you know, in order to meet people where they're at, we have to know where they're coming from or where they've been or something like that. And so I think that if we want to understand current problems, we have to understand historical legacies that have led to that point. And you asked the question about when I would ask people about Black social work history, the response I got from them, you know, that was primarily in, you know, in my MSW program, I did not know anything about Black social workers. It wasn't until I went and took Mark Courtney's class when I heard when Mark told us that the Hull House didn't serve Black folks. That was the first time that I really even considered that. And the problem, I think, the problem is this, and this is one reason that I shared the guide. I think that sometimes when people don't understand or know something, they say that they don't know. So I think when I ask them, like, do you know anything about like social workers or whatever, they say, oh, you know, I'm not sure if there's anything out there or what's out there. This guide, now people can take it and be like, okay, I don't know, but here's a place you can go that has stuff in there. And I'm hoping that the work that I've done on this guide will be replicated with Indigenous social work and social work with other communities of color out of that same effect.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Good evening, and thank you, Justin, for your presentation. As a BU alum and a person that studied in the macro field, one thing that I always felt was that there was a complete disconnect between the macro and the micro, as if they didn't go hand in hand, and oftentimes they were very much divided. And I kind of wonder about the collective optics of the social work profession, considering the systemic issues of racism and how sometimes it's been considered ineffective. But how do we change those optics enough for individuals who are, Black men, Black women, feel as if they would be valued in the profession, one, enough to actually attend the schools and to have the training and be in a space where there are more representation?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that it's important to be focusing on this type of work and this type of research more than 1 month out of the year. I think that we need to work harder to be discussing these things and making it part of our dominant discourse. I think that, I'm really starting to sense in social work this general push towards, everything that's been going on politically over the last couple of years shows that people are tired of the status quo. And I think you see this insurgence of, or resurgence of doctoral students, master's students, really saying, that we've had enough of the way that the profession has been in the past, and we really want to make changes for that. So I think the best thing that can happen, and the best way for us to move forward, is for social work programs to embrace this this focus and really work with students and faculty to make sure that the things that we're talking about today are better integrated into our programs and curriculum.
Thank you.
Thank you, reflectors. So I'm going to shift into some questions that we got in the chat. The first question being about the guide, Justin, and if it's available to participants. So is there a place that people can find it, or can we post it on our website?
Yeah, so I shared it on my Prof to Prof page. When I send, or in my slides, there's a link to it. I shared the link in the chat box with a link directly to the guide. But I should say that that's version 2 of the guide. Version 3, I've added a bunch of more resources, some archival resources, and also I've included there a number of links to recorded webinars and presentations on historical Black social workers. So that'll be up probably next week. So after I share my slides, if you just follow the link, or if you can just Google Prof to Prof in my name, and you'll be able to find it. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, our next question. What would social work look like today if the dominant white profession listened to NABSW and Black social workers?
That's a good question. I think, and again, like I said in the beginning of my presentation, I think as a helping profession, I think that we have done a lot as a profession towards anti-racism work. I think that we've done a lot for the Black community, and so, and I neglected to say this at the beginning of the presentation, that when we, and this is something I certainly fall victim to all the time, I tend to critique the history of social work through a contemporary lens. And we have to understand that the social workers of the time were largely a product of their time. And a lot of the dominant ideologies then and the dominant ways of thinking then were the ways that social workers were thinking. But I think as a profession, our work towards advocacy and supporting marginalized populations has come a long way, but there's so much more that needs to be done. So I think, what it would look like now if they did, I'm not sure, but I can't go back and change the past. I'm just focused on what we can do now. And I think that's an important thing.
Okay. We have a couple questions about CSWE and accreditation. So one question is, what is CSWE doing to incorporate art history and required coursework?
I'm not that familiar with what CSWE is doing on their end, but I can say that as part of the Minority Fellowship, my experience with on that end of it has been that they're trying to do a lot around it. They've engaged with me, and I'll be working with Dave or Dr. Pate and Dr. Sheely to develop this into a course that will be shared on their website. So I can just speak on the interactions that I've had with CSWE, and it seems like they want to make progress towards addressing anti-racism and better integrate Black social work history in their curriculum. And we'll see how that goes.
We also had a question about, someone mentioned they didn't know that Hull House and Jane Addams didn't serve Black people. And they were wondering can they learn more information about this history? Yeah, so in my guide, there's a few, there's a book, and there's actually 2 books on Black settlement houses. What I've learned about it has come from there. Yes, thank you for sharing that link. That also is what was just shared in the chat box is a good article. And that article also looks at the ways in which, in that article, they argue that Black women specifically, but Black settlement houses more generally, were the precursor towards this movement towards resistance. And that it was Blacks, in that article, they argue that the Black settlement house movement, the resistance among Black women in creating those, was a precursor to largely the civil rights movement. And so, so that article also, I forget the name of the book, but it's on Black settlement houses, Black neighbors. It was, I shared the image of it in my slides. Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. To what extent do you think racism has discouraged BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color folks from seeking social work services? And how do you see trust being rebuilt? Yeah, I think trust can be rebuilt by the community seeing action being taken to ensure that their welfare and their needs are being met with services that are focused on their needs. I think if you look at Dr. Sheely's book on the resistance towards social policies, and I think also if you look at a number of resources that are in that guide around clients' distrust among the social work profession, period, and then how that has trickled down into their interactions with caseworker and social work related folks. And I think that we can help rebuild that trust by demonstrating that we're a profession that understands the importance of knowing what the true needs are of a community, and then working to meet those needs. Yeah. We have a bunch of questions, but I do want to be mindful of time. We did tell everyone that we'll end this at 6:30. So we will be sharing Justin's slides, so you will have his contact information should you want to reach out. I'm also going to put in the chat, we have a webpage for the Equity and Inclusion Committee here at BU, where we'll post this video and resources. We also have a talk next month around settler colonialism that Autumn Asher Blackdeer, who is a PhD candidate at Washington University in St. Louis will be doing. So we invite you to register for that. And I will again share this information with you all via email. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Justin, for your amazing presentation.
Thank you. And thank you, reactors, especially Dr. Eschman